episode of Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie, and with me, the beautiful Crystal Ann Compton. And we're so excited to be here again with you today to talk about the next chapters of the Surrender Experiment. And today we're going to be covering chapters 6 and 7 of the Surrender Experiment. Section 6 and 7 of the Surrender. Thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.
And we're going to be exploring a little bit more of, Mickey's journey and the evolution of his company and the lessons that come with that journey. And next week, we'll be finishing up the Surrender Experiment, sections 8 and 9. So we hope that you will join us for that final episode where we're going to, wrap it all up and take our takeaways, right, from what we learned from this
Yes,
book.
absolutely.
And we just wanted to let you know that after that, we are going to have a couple weeks where we're just going to be exploring the gene keys. Crystal and I are very excited about the gene keys. And really, it's an exploration of something that you can really contemplate. So we'd love to have you just be on that journey with us. Look up your own chart, your own hologenetic profile, and really explore how do these gene keys, how are they showing up in your life, and what can you do with them? So I think that's all the announcements.
Yes, I think so. Other than just to remind you that we have a Facebook group if you want to join us there. It is Miraculous Thinking, link in the description. Join us. All are welcome. We also would invite you to reach out and talk with us. We have an email account that you can write, which is miraculousthinking@gmail.com. We read absolutely every email. And if you have a question or a comment, we will absolutely include it in the podcast. We love to hear from you.
We certainly do. So please reach out with any feedback, and especially about, have you been practicing the surrender experiment? And if so, how has it been going? What are your wins? What are your challenges? We'd love to know.
Yes, most definitely. So let's get into these two sections of the book. And I'm just going to give you my out of the gate perception of what I am reading, which is I'm a little bored. I'm just always going to be representing the normies out there, just like, come on, get to it. Come on, I get it.
Yeah.
We're building a business and the medical manager is growing and now we're getting automated and now it's computer to computer and now I'm hiring a new engineer. And I can absolutely appreciate the serendipity of how he's hiring all of these amazing people. And I can acknowledge that these people are fated for the business because they stay for such a long time. They tend to have spiritual values in alignment with his. But Elenique, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, so why is the medical manager or programming solutions, I forget what the name of this company is, why is that such a big deal to spirit? Like, is it creating this technology that is truly beneficial to the world, or is it creating the technology so that he can use the money to build the temple, acquire more land, and expand his spiritual life and practice? I'm trying to figure out the significance of his business spiritually.
Yeah. I think that eventually in the final section of the book, I think we're going to see some twists and turns regarding the business.
Okay.
And some things that go down that become learning lessons of surrender through deep challenge, right? So that's coming up in the last two. So I think we'll see how the business becomes the portal or the opportunity for really experiencing what it's like to fly very, very high. And then when there's challenges to that and you're falling, and I think he's foreshadowing a little bit of that with
Okay.
Amrit's story. So we'll see that in the next section. Um, and also, I think, again, to reinforce this idea that God is in everything and there is nothing that is of the world or spiritual, but that it's all one. And just that when you're in the flow of that, when you're in the flow of trusting spirit from the most mundane, such as a business and physical abundance and all of that, to the spiritual transformational experiences are all really the same thing, just like a pendulum of the same thing. Vibratorily, one is very like interpersonal, like within yourself, and the other one is with others. I never know. Is it interpersonal when it's inside yourself and intrapersonal when it's with others, or is it the
Girl,
other way
who are you
around?
asking? I have
I
no idea.
don't know. So I think interpersonal is within yourself and
I
intrapersonal is
think you're
with
right.
others, right?
But the
So
internet connects me
yes,
to others. I don't know. Okay.
yeah. Or we're entering into the net. I don't know.
Okay.
Could be that too. But so let's just assume for this this explanation. The interpersonal, so this relationship of surrender with spirit has, in the beginning of the book, we saw it as an interpersonal something with him within himself, with
Yeah.
his um, conditioning and his resistance and his fears and whatever. And now we're seeing how that same experience is manifesting in reality outside of himself. And so just sort of that dance between those things. But of course, you and I are much more interested in the interpersonal aspect of this. So I found it to be repetitive, not
Yes.
boring, but repetitive. I feel like I've heard that story a lot, when Rada came and the other one came. I don't even know all the people's names. And I was like, okay, great. I got it. Every time you
Hmm.
need somebody, spirit sends it, you know?
Right. Yeah, and
So,
it's just iterations of the same thing as the
mhm,
business itself is expanding. And the more business expands, the more issues you're going to have, and some of those are
yes.
challenges, and then the solutions also arriving right on time, which we see.
Hmm.
So that's it's and I love what you're talking about, but you're taking us back to the Kabbalion, which is we're
Hmm.
in the all, and the
Yes.
all is everything. And so, even muggle things or mundane things that we do in our life that we don't think have spiritual significance absolutely do. Everything can be a devotion to the practice or to the connection.
Yes.
And if you treat it as such and continue to surrender, as Mickey is doing, this is how you ensure that it shifts and changes, grows, but then maybe it doesn't stay growing here in the next few chapters, but shifts
Yeah.
and changes, and probably in accordance to what he needs and where he is on his own path.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. And you said the word muggle, and I'm thinking maybe we need to do a Harry Potter book at some
I've
point.
never read the Harry Potter
Me
books.
neither. My son read all of them. I
So did my
have all of
husband.
them. So I'm thinking, I'm like, that would be fun just to do for fun, like one
It would be.
episode on
A, dis-
Harry Potter.
a little disruptor would be cool.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of things that I wanted to touch upon in these two sections that I thought were fairly profound. The first coming from the chapter entitled The Scary Messenger of Change. And I
Mhm.
think in this chapter, we have the issue of his neighbor, which is going to be cutting, I guess, clear cutting a lot of the native foliage and trees in a property that's adjoining Mickey's property. And he's going to be planting some kind of scrubby pine. I don't know, in order to make some money. And so that's very traumatizing for Mickey because he wants the native growth to be there. So instead of being derailed by what looks like it's going to happen, he surrenders. He asks for a meeting with his neighbor, and they ultimately enter into an arrangement where Mickey is going to lease that land for a period of time and give him more money than he would have expected to make from the scrubby pines. I don't know, but um, and then I
Scrubby
think
pines.
I forget what it's called, scratch pines, something like that. And then in another instance, another piece of property near the temple is being converted into a waste dump, like a couple hundred acres of just a waste dump right up against the temple, which is also very traumatizing to consider. And so instead of getting derailed by how this is going to affect his ultimate vision or what he wants, he focuses on like approaching the city council, letting everybody know, hey, if they can do this to me, they can do this to you. And so the city council reverses the permit, and then he's able to buy that land, and he's able to move his business and all of these things. So, which is all great. What I liked about this is that, and how I relate is that in life, it is for me, we all have, we've been faced with really challenging things. And I have personally lost myself sometimes in how awful it is, or how unjust it is, or how terrible it is, thus elongating my season in that pain, as opposed to just flowing with it, allowing it to show itself, me witnessing it, me realigning back to center and then allowing it to pass. It's when we react to the hard thing showing up in our life and make a judgment about it and also get fatalistic about it. Like, oh, here comes a waste dump. Oh, God, how can my life get any worse? Then you start bickering with your family and your neighbors and you all get upset and you're reacting, that you perpetuate it and you make
Mhm.
more of it and you create more of it. But what if, when something difficult is presenting itself to us, in a non reactive way, we acknowledged it and then sought out the solution and trusted? And trust is such a big theme in this book because he doesn't know what's going to happen. He would have never guessed all the things that have happened. What if we just trusted that this is all happening for our greater good and the end result is going to be a blessing? That, for me, that's difficult. That's difficult in the moment to know how to do. I'm sure for everybody.
Yes, I think that is the biggest challenge is and we talked about it with Neville Goddard. He says that when you plant that seed, you can't keep uncovering it to see if it's growing.
Mm,
So when you put the seed in the ground, you're not going to suddenly see the sprout or the tree. So there is that moment where the wish has been planted, but the outside does not confirm what you're hoping will happen, which is the resolution of the problem state, right? Or the fulfillment of the desire. So that's when most of us give up when the outside contradicts what we deeply want and we don't have sufficient faith to just say, even though the outside's showing up like this, that's okay because it won't last forever. Life is a pendulum, just like the Kabbalion. This too will pass, right?
mm-hmm,
And just keeping that focus on the outcome that you want to manifest. So I think that that's the biggest thing. How do you believe in what you don't see? Isn't that what they say faith is?
mm-hmm.
Believing
Yes.
in what you don't see and knowing that it will come or that it is there. But for me, what was interesting about this section was he took action here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So this is a little bit, I'm trying to synthesize this surrender experiment situation with which is one of our viewers had written and said, well, how do you know when to act and when not to act? Are you just like a doormat? Right. Should he just be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, so how does he tell, how can he tell that he should do something about the waste dump as opposed to saying, well, if God wants there to be a waste dump
Right.
across from the temple, then I just have to allow a waste dump. So I found that was interesting because where do you draw the line? Where do you take action? And when do you just say, well, let it be what it's going to be? And that's really what I'm still seeking in this book. And I suppose you only get that from within yourself as a knowingness that he must be utilizing.
Right, but he's really got an opportunity here to illuminate us on what the process actually looks
Yes.
like. And you know, you and me, we like some steps. We
Yeah.
like a process, we like a technique that we can use and run for ourselves. And it's ambiguous how he would not move on some things and they would
Hmm.
come into the experience, and then he would make the decision to act on other things and it would be a new experience. So I
Like
wish
the
he would have talked.
house.
Yes,
The
like the
house that
house.
the rat, I think, tells him, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Mickey, you really got to move out from, inside the pantry behind the kitchen." It doesn't make
Like,
sense
I don't
or
get
wherever he's
that.
living. And he's like, "I'm fine. And if the universe wants me to move, then the universe is going to present me with a house." Well, why is that something that you have to wait for an invitation for, right? But then, or something to respond to, but the waste dump isn't, or the going over to negotiate with the neighbor regarding the trees. I mean, he initiated that. The neighbor didn't come and say, "Hey, Mickey, what do you think about me instead of me harvesting the scrubby, scratchy pines or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is? Why don't you come and lease the land from me or give me
Right.
an idea?" So I'm struggling with knowing when is action appropriate and when is surrender appropriate.
Great point. And I think that what we need to remember is that through all of these experiences that he's having, he's being refined as a very powerful businessman, whether he would like to paint himself with that brush or not. I mean,
Mhm.
by the end of this chapter, we've got an 85,000 square foot building for his all of his companies. Like,
Yes.
he's a businessman. So he's got his own acumen. He's probably got his own specific intuition around this. And so he would know when to move and how to act and what to do, um, as opposed to just kind of leaving it all up to this airy fairy concept of the universe will provide. Okay, but yes, at the same time, you're a powerful businessman now. You've got connections in the city council, you know the sheriff, you know all of these people. You've got your
Mhm.
former construction business that's building all of you. Like, so you're connected, and there's something to be said for that as well, right? So I
Yeah.
just feel like we could have had more of a discussion about that.
Yeah, it's hard to marry still. Like you said, a person that develops a business this big, and as a person that's run businesses that are much less complex than the one he's
Mhm.
describing, the skill set that has to
Yes.
be there, just actual intelligence and skill set, is not something that you can do without having a certain degree of high intelligence,
Hmm.
capacity to think ahead. I mean, even just the idea of putting together a company that even looks like that. Where do you even begin? And people come into his life, but we see that a lot of it is directed by him. And let's not forget that the guy was a college professor
Hmm.
who studied logic and philosophy and could create,
Economics, I thought
yeah,
too, right? Yeah.
economics and things.
Hmm.
So this is a incredibly intelligent man that has written books by this point. So this is not your average Joe.
Right.
This is not your average Mickey. you know?
Right.
So there are some foundational things that are within him that were there prior to this that are now being utilized to make this happen. So, but the raw material is there. So I think that's another thing we have to kind of warn people about, is to say just because you surrender doesn't mean you're suddenly going to become like a business maverick
Mm-mm.
if you don't have the foundational understanding and intelligence to know how to do that.
And isn't it kind of setting it up so that we feel like Mickey doesn't have a vision for his own life? Like that he doesn't even seem very interested in what comes next. He's just trusting the process, he's surrendering. But I can't really believe that because, first of all, I think vision is an integral part. I know it's an integral part of manifestation. You've got to be able to see it, you've got to be able to plan for it, you've got to be able to feel yourself as already that. And I wish we would have gotten a bit more of that from him because he's obviously got his own dreams. I mean, he's partnering with spirit. This is not just spirit's bright idea. You're the vessel
Yeah.
for this. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a missing component. I do want to say, taking it back to the seed, which becomes the sprout, which becomes the manifestation. Let's not forget the pure destructive power of the sapling breaking free from the seed, or the mighty oak coming from the acorn. That acorn has to be destroyed
Hmm.
before the new growth comes into being. And life is often like that. It's like the tarot tower card.
Mm.
Something has to be completely dismantled in order for something new to be created. And this is sometimes the way life shows up for us, taking it back to when something's really painful. And instead of spiraling into reaction, like, why me? Why again? How come this always happens to me? And then elongating the season of your life in the pain, just recognizing that often that destruction, the dismantling of what is known in order for the unknown to come into being, that's part of it. And if we can embrace that and recognize it when it's happening, we can relieve ourselves from some of this pain and transform that into, oh, it's breaking down. Okay, that means something new is coming, and maybe even get a little bit hopeful in the process.
And I think that if you judge his interests based on how the book is laid out, like over half of the book is about his company.
Uh-huh.
So clearly, the company is important to him, the story
Mm-hmm.
of the company. Otherwise, why would you? He could have said all this in one chapter.
Yeah.
I made the company, all the right people fell into place, and I had a couple challenges and hiccups, but here we are, right? So the sheer volume of time that is devoted to talking about how the company grew and exactly in very specific detail, and then
Mm-hmm.
this person came in, and then that person came in, and we went to that show. So I think that there is an aspect that is very much focused on the company and the creation of the company, even though he doesn't address that directly as, hey, you know what? I really did want an awesome company. Maybe I didn't even know it.
Right.
Because this is coming subconsciously, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like you said at the beginning, why does spirit care about the medical manager? What does spirit get from the medical man? Nothing. So spirit's responding to some subconscious desire. So
Mm-hmm.
whether he's aware of it or not, even though it may not be coming from ego, there is a desire to create something here.
Yes.
And the universe is responding to that desire. And for what reason? Maybe to have enough money to continue the good work of the temple. We'll never know. I mean, we don't know what his motivation is. But I think it's important to not feel like he's just bumbling around on a boat in the ocean, crashing into islands that have oil. And now he's like
Wouldn't
an
you
oil
say that
baron.
that's kind of how he's setting it up, though?
That's
Like
kind of how
he's
it
just
feels.
like a reed in the wind, bending this way and that way according to the wind of the universe. I feel like, I think you're a little bit more determining here. I think you have a vision. I think you want the business. I think you want to take care of your employees. I think you want to funnel this money back into the land and build a temple. I think you must, because without a vision and without a plan, things tend to fall apart. And I would be so interested
Hmm.
to talk about aligning vision with what's showing up from spirit and co-creation of the new thing being manifested. That's my jam. I
Yeah.
mean, chapter after chapter, just talking about the business is kind of getting lost on me. Not to complain, because I mean, obviously, there's a lot of nuggets along the way, but I just feel like there's something that we're missing out on a little bit.
Again, it's the same thing we experienced with the four agreements. It's the same thing. But again, maybe that's the way it is with spiritual transformation, right? There's only so far that words can point, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not a one, two, three, add two eggs, a cup of flour and some yeast and put it in the oven and you have an egg, a cake. So I think that that is where all words fail. And the experience that you go on individually is so uniquely yours and no
Mm.
one can tell you how to do it. They can tell you sort of the generalities. Hey, don't take things personally. Pull up from the mitote, look down, create distance, trust the universe, follow your gut. But at the end of the day, there is no one path and no way to translate what that communion is with the divine until you have it. The same thing as like when I was pregnant, I would ask everybody, what is giving birth like? What is it like? Is it painful? Is it kind of like a really bad period? What is it? And everybody's like, yeah, it's like a bad period, but you also have to go to the bathroom, but you also, it's also the worst thing you've ever felt. I was like, okay. When I had my baby, I realized I could never describe this to anybody. I could never explain what that process of birth is like. I could say, yes, it's like a really bad spasm. Yes, it's like a really bad cramp. It's pain like you've never experienced, but how can you understand what I mean when I say pain like you've never experienced? Because you've never experienced it, you know? So it's like this at a certain moment, in love, the love that I felt when I had my son,
Mm.
can never explain. How can you love something the minute that it's born and you've never met it before? And it's like you
Yeah.
would kill the whole world to protect this baby, you know? So that feeling, I was like, how do I explain this love? It's more than anything I can ever. So I think this is where we hit the blocks with spiritual literature. There just comes a moment when they cannot draw the bridge any further. And then you've got to go make your leap and figure it out for yourself.
This is such a good analogy, the analogy of birth, because not only is it indescribable, so somebody really couldn't even prepare you for it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, my perception of it was they could have told me more, though. It's almost like there's this concerted effort to have this mystery around the process of birth. Like nobody prepared me for the sleepless nights. Nobody prepared
Mhm.
me for the contract. Like people could have told me more, but there's some sort of a transmuting, mysterious, sacred thing that only you can experience. No other
Mhm.
mama can tell you how it is. I can say, girl, get the drugs. It's painful, right? But
Mhm.
I can't really impart to you the totality of that sacred experience, nor would I want to. And I think that's just, but I think women have been doing that for generations. Here's part of it, but you're never going to know all of it till you do it yourself. So
No.
why even try explaining?
It's like, when they have those things when you want to join a fraternity or sorority or something, they've got these hazing things where you got to go through all these things. I don't know. I never was in any sorority, but you hear about it. These rites of passage, right? Like in tribes, there's these rites of passage, and motherhood is that. Motherhood is like that pregnancy, those 9 months of being uncomfortable, like more uncomfortable than you ever knew that you could be, and then the process of giving birth and then being completely exhausted from giving birth and then not getting a chance to rest and having to push through your exhaustion and really have this unconditional surrender to serving that baby. All those things are things that I think they made me so much of a better person.
Mm.
Like just I had to surrender and in exhaustion, just get up anyway. Baby's crying. well, come on,
Somebody's got to get up.
you
Yeah.
got to do it. So it's a beautiful thing, but I think that spiritual growth is like that. It's these things that nobody they can use words, and then like the Buddha said, you use the words to point at the moon, and the people keep looking at your finger,
Yeah.
right?
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
And so he's
beautiful.
like this,
Hmm.
right? And we don't look at what he's pointing at. We're
Hmm.
fixated on this.
Mm.
And that's the same thing with this book, right? He's pointing at something.
Yes. Thank you. So good. That's a really good way to say it. He is pointing at something. And it's ours to experience in only
Mhm.
the way that we can.
Yes.
So, the other part of this couple of sections that we read was, I think, the final chapter or thereabouts, where he gets into Amrit Desai. And so, as we recall, he
Mhm.
met Amrit, I think, at the retreat place or something like this. And he felt Amrit. And I think Amrit touched his
Touched
third
his
eye, and then it went
yes.
down to the heart. Like he had this
Mhm.
energy dispensation. And the way he paints it is, Amrit is this beautiful soul. And I think it was Amrit who went into the prison to talk to the prisoner on death row.
Yes. Correct.
So there's this beautiful guru. Well, apparently at some point, Amrit encounters scandal in his community and is cast out
Mhm.
and comes to Mickey at the temple and ends up living there with his wife for, I think, 3 years or something like this. And well, let's talk to you about that. What did you think about that whole part of the story?
You know, I found it surprising at the beginning when I first read it. I was like, wow, because Amrit's the one that gave him that feeling of unconditional love that he said never went away. So such a purity. But you and I have discussed that that's the challenge with gurus. And that again, we see that you have a physical animal aspect to people that is still there. And you have this spiritually evolved soul. And sometimes those things are at odds with each other. And I find that this whole way the world is now with this cancel culture and this way of like building people up just to tear them down, which seems to be what people like to do the most, it negates the fact that everyone that's still here is learning. Otherwise, why would they be here? Right? If you're some ascended master like Christ checked out very quickly. He's like,
Mhm.
done, mic drop. And then he went. And so I feel like I have a lot of compassion because it's so difficult to get away sometimes from the shadow of yourself, no matter how much light is around you. I find that people ignore that, push it down, try to not look at it, and it's there. And I think he clearly had a shadow,
Mhm.
whatever that may be. And but he got cast out. There's no redemption, you see. And that's the part that makes me sad. And that's why I love that book, The Scarlet Letter, because everyone has made mistakes. Everyone. And some of commission and some of omission. Some things that you should have done, should have stood up for, and didn't do. So those are as bad. Yet instead of looking for the redemption in it, right? Like, how can I create a way back for this person? It's just like, you're no good. So throw out the baby with the bathwater. So for me, that was very sad. I mean, and I understand they had to take a position. I don't know what he did. I think you said you Googled what it
I
was.
immediately did.
Okay.
I immediately Googled Amrit Desai, who is still teaching to this day, I
Oh
believe.
my
And I
gosh.
think there's YouTube videos
I have to
that
look
I
him
will
up.
check out. But this happened in 1994, and apparently he was the leader of the Kripalu community, and he set into place very strict rules for men and women. And if you weren't married, you could not like cohabitate. There were separate spaces for each. And again, very strict about this. And ultimately ended up having sexual encounters with some of his devotees,
Okay.
which came to the light. And then he got cast out, and he ultimately had to pay, I think, $2.5 million in settlements to these women.
Wow.
And so there's a part of me that's like, well, that's appropriate. Like if you're
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
abusing your authority,
Well, yes.
and if you're putting into place a series of rules for other people, but not abiding them in your own life, then you're not fit to stand as the leader, guru, authority of this community. What I liked about this chapter, first of all, I liked that Mickey welcomed him,
Me too.
because in cancel culture 2023, we have people I mean, even I mean, this has been going on for years in America, like, just if you have family members with a different political bent, like, people are walking away from them forever,
It's
just
crazy.
unpersoning them, pretending they don't exist, or pretending people don't make mistakes or have fallacious ways of thinking. Like, we don't make room for people to be authentically themselves. Um, some of us do, and I think we're actually correcting out of cancel culture. I think people are
I
getting
hope
tired of
so.
this. People realizes this is not realistic. Like, we're all making mistakes, and of course, the people who are the loudest about what somebody else is doing wrong, we find out that they've been doing wrong too. It's just we're human beings. We've got to accept
Mm,
it. So Mickey welcoming him in, and then his observation of Amrit as he's staying at the temple or on the grounds for 3 years with his wife, like, not, I didn't read that Amrit took direct ownership. I don't know if they had talks about what happened. Maybe they did, but he wasn't defensive. He wasn't in denial. He was just present in exactly what was happening to him, and he was dealing with it. And even though it was very challenging, I can only imagine, he was at the same time trying to be as aligned as possible with spirit,
mhm.
even having fallen from grace and done something that I would say is objectively bad,
Very.
objectively wrong. And he knows
Mhm.
everybody knows it. So there's a lot of ways to handle something like that. I think
Yes.
some people immediately start to deflect. People start to deny. People start to lie. They run away from it. But he's right there in the midst of it, being present with it.
He's owning it.
He's owning it.
He's owning it. And like you said, paying a price for your mistakes, which is just the karmic consequence of that, is appropriate. What I have an issue with is saying that you can't come back from it. And that's the part that I don't agree with. That is very prevalent in the world today. It's like,
Yes.
hey, you did this, and I don't know what happened. I hope that it was consensual with these women, because that's a completely other different level of issue that we would be having. But assuming that it was consensual relationships, but that there was this issue of utilizing sort of the power that he had over them to induce them into this behavior, that was a total misuse of authority, and yet after you fall from that, after you fall from that height, there has to be room for grace for everyone. Like, I just remember that movie with Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn where
Dead Man
she goes,
Walking.
yes, I think
Mm-hmm.
was it Dead Man Walking?
Mm-hmm. She's the nun
And
and he's on
she's
death
a
row.
nun, yes, and she goes and she's, it's just again, and like when Amrit went to the jail and with the guy that killed all the motorcycle guys, it's like there's still a soul in there. You can't, to me, it's impossible to say there's no hope, there's no love for you at some level. And like I struggle with that because there's a lot of people that do so many things in the world that's so messed up that you ask yourself, how can there still be room for this person? How can there still be light or love or opportunity? I always say to myself, there's still a soul in there, a really messed up soul. So I always just want to hold space for that and be like,
Absolutely.
you know,
But isn't it interesting to look at the juxtaposition? Because, of course, there's a soul in Amrit as this is happening, but there's a very divine, powerful force in Amrit at the same
awesome.
time as is existing this penchant for straying from his wife and sexual misconduct. Can
Hmm.
both of those things exist in the same person at the same time?
And clearly they do, because, and you see it over and over. This thing with the gurus, it's almost like, it's like presidents having affairs. You know what I mean? It's like, okay. It's like, and I don't know what it is. I think sometimes they say in the that theory that we talked about of involution, when you evolve out of God and then
Mm-hmm.
come back to God and you evolve back into yourself, they say that there's a part where you become so enlightened, you have so much power. And if you utilize that power for negative purposes, you lose all of the spiritual evolution and power that you had in the next, and you come back all the way back at the
I
beginning, like a,
forgot about that.
remember? So
Yes.
it's like there is this moment when you are hitting that thing and either you shoot up to the next level or you go right back, like shoots and ladders. It's like shoots and ladders.
It is like shoots and ladders.
You're almost at the top and then you screw it up, and it's and there's such a karma for that, because now
Mhm.
you've taken that divine power and utilized it for your own personal carnal or whatever needs.
So is he going through the chutes and ladders in the same incarnation? Does he leave this incarnation and have to come back and start at the very
I don't know.
beginning?
Who can know that for someone else, right? Like, because it's such an internal thing, and who can
Right.
judge another person's internal journey, no matter how they appear on the outside, you know?
Yeah.
But but I'm wondering, because like you said, a person that has the capacity to give the gift of love to someone else that doesn't end for like 40 years, that's something very beautiful, you know? So I'm
Yes.
wondering what happened.
Well, you know, if you look at the scriptures, there's this concept of the Bema seat. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh.
The Bema seat, which is, gosh, I'm going back into my childhood here, but the idea, I think, is that at the end of your life, you kind of cast all of your doings, all of your works at the throne of the Bema seat. And the good that you do comes back to you. The rest is refined by fire. And so I feel like if we looked at it in the context of a life review, you know, at the end of your life, you actually review your life and you take the things that you did well and you accept the reward for these. And maybe that's a vibrational reward. Maybe it doesn't take you as long to adjust or modify into enlightenment or heaven or whatever that is. And then there's the stuff that you did wrong. That's a judgment. I don't think from that vantage point we have those kinds of judgment of self. It's all just information and we look at it. But in this life, in his life here, he's thrown things at the Bema seat. He's thrown things at the throne, and some is he gets jewels, and then he also gets coal for what he has done. I don't know, and I agree with you. I feel like it is not for us to judge, but we are so inclined to do so. And when Jesus is yelling at all the people, "You who are without sin, cast the first stone," there's nobody throwing stones at that point because we're all doing it. What I love
Hmm.
about this, though, is Mickey, because
Yeah.
it is so easy to join the cloud of witnesses and condemn somebody else. Just like when we remember that St. Paul was in the crowd when they were stoning Stephen to death. He was there watching and a part of it. Not that he picked up a stone to do it, but he was there complicit as somebody was being taken down. It is so revolutionary to be the one that says, "Ye who are without sin, cast the," standing in front of somebody. And so this is what Mickey is doing. And not to equate myself with any of these people, but there was a time, I just have to tell you a story, that I had a friend. I would say he was a good friend, and I'd known him for years. I had been out of touch with him somewhat, and he was a blogger. And he made a post during the Me Too era about the things that he had done wrong and that he didn't know at the time, due to misogyny culture, that they were necessarily wrong. Although, I mean, inherently they're wrong. I would feel that you would know this, but he did them anyway. But he was confessing in a post, and nothing was, well, I don't want to make a judgment of it. I've heard worse things, I've heard better things. But he put it all out there, and he was a rather popular blogger. And when I tell you, the cloud of people that descended upon him, he didn't expect it. He thought, I think, that people would say, "Oh my God, well done. Thank you for confessing
Hmm.
that. We see that you're
Hmm.
changing." Nope. People came in and immediately started to condemn him, call him out, bring up other things that he had done, and accuse him of other, even worse things. And it was kind of amazing to him because some of these people were his closest friends
Wow.
and already knew this about him, had already witnessed him doing
Oh.
things, but like took the opportunity to put themselves out there in the spotlight to condemn him. And I remember reading that post and thinking, that's really gross, but you're my friend. And I wonder, in the midst of all this that's happening, how are you? Like,
Hmm.
because mental health is real, you know, and like, are you okay? And so I texted him and reached out and we started talking, and I ended up talking to him and saying, "Hey, you know, I don't obviously approve of any of this, but I love you so very much and I'm concerned about you and I'm here if you need anything." I ended up employing him for something, giving him some work for a period of time just to support. And I remember people in that cloud of accusers started taking it out on me because I knew
Oh
some of
my
them.
gosh.
It's not I knew some of them. I'm like, I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that. And if you fell from grace, which you would never do, you're the most beautiful, gracious person I know. But if you did, I would be there for you. I would not stop being your friend. And so that takes a certain kind of authenticity and maybe even bravery. I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about Mickey here, because Amrit Desai is high profile, high profile around the world. And to be seen as the person who is giving shelter to someone so high profile who has fallen is a risk. He's building his business, he's expanding his temple, he's seen as a spiritual figure, but he didn't give sway to that. He was a friend anyway. And I was just like, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's character.
I love that. I love that he did that and that that's who he was. And you know what the thing is, Crystal? I mean, everybody has made mistakes.
Yes.
And the thing is, you're just lucky if you die before everybody figures out all your skeletons. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
those people that die and they have like a perfect record and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what an upstanding citizen of society."
Dolly
Just
Parton.
they just only maybe,
I know.
maybe only Dolly. But I'm so far from perfect. I've made so many mistakes that if I look back on my life, I'm like, Lord, what the heck was I thinking? And I almost feel like I was possessed. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there are moments in your life when you go, who was there?
Mhm.
Because I wasn't there. It's like that body was loose and somebody else stepped in. I even started to believe in that thing where they have those you know, when they say they have those fill-ins, walk-ins.
Walk-ins.
Yeah, I feel
Mhm.
like I had a walk-in. It took over my like mid to late 20s, you know? And I'm like, whoo, okay, that wasn't really me. I don't remember being that before. And I definitely don't feel being that after, but something went very wrong somewhere in
Mhm.
there. And as I look back, I'm like, I have no idea what created that. Not really. And yet I I own it, you know, I own it and I just try to do good with what I learned from all the things that I didn't know then. Didn't
Mhm.
know, couldn't understand, you know? So I definitely consider myself to be a person that is like him in that regard, where I really don't care what anybody else thinks, especially when it comes to my friends. And my husband gets very upset with me because sometimes he'll be like, "What's going on with so and so?" Like if something's going down, and I'm go, "Why didn't you call her?" He goes, "Well, I mean, I'm not gonna call her. She's your friend." I go, "Exactly. So it's none of your business." Like, I just can't. And everybody in my family gets mad. You're like a tomb. I'm like, if somebody trusts me with something, they're not trusting you with that.
Mm.
They're trusting me. So I owe it to them to honor it. I wish people would honor my
Right.
deepest problematic secrets, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm very proud of Mickey for doing that. And that is a real friend. 3 years living on somebody's property.
Mhm.
That's not like, hey, you can sleep on my couch for a week,
Right.
you know? And he did it and he supported him and he didn't look down on him,
No.
which is the part that I love,
Right.
you know?
Right. And he didn't deny that at the same time as being utterly human, he's utterly divine. There's a couple of quotes from this chapter that I wanted to just share. First one being, this is from the vantage point of Mickey. I constantly saw in Amrit what I always saw inside of me. When push comes to shove, I don't care what it takes, just free me from myself. The only meaningful prayer is that this white hot fire be so destructive to the personal self that it severs the cord that binds. Standing soul to soul, Amrit and I had that in common, liberation at any cost.
I read that and I was like, a part of me was like, not so hot, please.
Little more comfy, little more comfy.
Not such devastating fire, Nikki, you know, but definitely they seem to be on that path. You know, it's like anybody that can keep a spiritual discipline the way he did for as many years as he did, that in itself, it's like you deserve an award. Meditating every single day, holding services every day for a group, not just for yourself, for like holding up a community,
Right.
morning, night, bringing people, being an example. So it's a lot of pressure, you know?
It is a lot of pressure, but what it felt like to me is he was saying that Amrit was actually availing himself of a certain kind of
Mm,
opportunity for transmutation, which was pain, which
yes.
was facing the self, which was allowing that fire that refines to just consume him so that he could, in an accelerated way, get to the other side of that, as opposed to resisting. Because if we resist, if we deflect, if we deny, it takes us a long time to get through the lesson. But he's just like,
Totally.
here I am, God. I get it. I'm here. Transform me. And there's
Yes.
something pretty a little violent, but amazing about that.
and radical and scary. And again, like just like jumping into a volcano, right?
Yes.
You're just like, okay, let's just do this. And I feel like I had that a little bit when I had when my son passed away. It was sort of this thing where everybody wanted to numb it out, or like, you need to take antidepressants. I'm like, no, I need to feel this whole thing and not resist it. Just let it go through me. Let me sit in this. And now I'm understanding there's another level to that, because I thought I had gone through that level over the last 4 years, but now, as we discussed earlier, I've discovered, oh, wait a minute, there's a cavern underneath the initial, blast from the eruption. And this cavern hasn't been explored. So let's go in here now, and living with it, living with your pain,
Mm.
and allowing it to be that accelerant for your knowing yourself and separating from the personality and witnessing. Just witness it. Don't try to make it go away. Don't try to make pain go away. Just be there with it. Okay, there's pain here. Who has the pain? The body, the emotions, not me. I'm watching it.
Mm.
I'm keeping it company.
Mm. I love that. I'm keeping it company. Well, there is this idea that we return to, that healing is a spiral. And I would say enlightenment is a spiral. I would say refinement is a spiral. It drops down
Mm-hmm.
from quote unquote above. And giving us a visual, I would say that it enters in through the crown and it starts making its way in a spiral down through the whole of who you are. And as it winds around, it's touching a new chakra, it's touching a new part of the body,
Yep.
which is also holding some memories and some patterns
Yes.
and some beliefs. And so as it's making its way down, new things are coming into the consciousness and awareness. And so you think you're healed when it hits your crown, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
This is the very
You're
beginning.
like, oh wait, there's 8
Yeah,
more floors.
there's 8 more floors. And
8
then
more
some.
stories.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's never just, it's, well, who am I to say? Maybe it is just a one-off, but typically it is a process and it can take a
Yes.
long time. And the more you are with it as you're talking about it, observing, honoring the process, the quicker it makes its way through you. But when you
Mm-hmm.
resist, react, feel pain, judge it, then now you're stuck in this, the heart
The
chakra for
judgment
5
is the
years.
hardest one. The
Yes,
judgment, because you judge that you should be happy or that you should be healthy.
right.
Like I shared with you, I have this crazy fibromyalgia. It comes and goes, but now it's been the worst that it's been for years. And normally I'm like, when's it going to end? Can I find a medicine to make it go away? And this time I'm like, what are you trying to tell me, body? Like, what's not okay here? Like, what am I not looking at? What emotion am I not looking at? What memory am I not looking at? What am I eating that I'm not supposed to be eating? Like, where is this coming from? Talk to me, as opposed to shut up. Let me just take some painkillers and be quiet, which is the way that I have handled it previously. And now I'm like, what's so bad about pain? Like, obviously, you don't want to hang out all your life and be in pain, but pain is communicating so much.
And so, having taken this different stance, would you say that allowing it and listening, you're learning a lot?
A lot. And what I find is that even though there's pain, um, I still have peace, which I didn't have before. What I had was anxiety and, this feeling of so, but there's a peace inside of the pain. And so I'm trying to be ever more in that and watching from there.
Mhm.
And it makes it easier, instead of harder, as opposed to before, where I would just be like constantly looking for the way to make it stop.
Right. Profound. Another quote, if I may share. Um, no matter who we are, life is going to put us through the changes we need to go through. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
The question is, are we willing to use this force for our transformation? I saw that even very intense situations, for example, with Amrit, don't have to leave psychological scars if we are willing to process our changes at a deeper level, which is exactly what you have talked about here.
And the source of your suffering is memory. and the story that the memory tells, right?
Mhm.
So there is physical pain. Physical pain exists, it's there, it's communicating. That has nothing to do with suffering. Suffering is the story you tell about your pain, the story you're making up about your pain, the way you're storing that memory. So if you can just work with the way that you're contextualizing your pain, whatever it may be, emotional, physical, spiritual, and just be like, is there another way to look at that? Is that really helpful? Is it even true? And then you start to dismantle it. Like you said, you like take away, it's almost like it's a, you know how they have those, I don't know if it's like a fungus or something that grows that has all these little legs that have all these little veins that feed it. And then you just are like cutting all those little sources of the charge. And
Mhm.
then the thing will either just remain the same or shrink till you don't even feel it anymore. You don't even remember that it's there. But all you changed was memory.
Wow. So, irrespective of the redundancy, the
Yes.
Department of Redundancy Department. And, just the example after example in a business context of how
Yes.
spirit moves and serendipity and synchronicity is real. There were some really profound reminders for me and examples of true spirituality in effect and moving. So I'm still loving this book. We
Me
have
too.
only 2 more sections to go. We're going to
Yeah.
be releasing that next week, the final 2 sections, as we wrap this up. And apparently, some shifts and changes happen in his business, and we'll see how he deals with that.
Hmm.
I'm
Yes, we
looking
will.
forward to it, and
Me
our final
too.
thoughts and takeaways from the surrender experiment. And no matter when you are listening to this, whether you have read it or not, it is a book that I think that you should read. I think it is really, 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 really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very impressed with him and how he was able to take something quite, I like that he used his story
Yeah.
because it's like parable, it's like a story that you're going through a journey, the hero's journey, right?
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
seeing it in action so we can relate as opposed to something that's just like, here's an abstract system, do this, and you can't connect with it.
Yeah, and he used the story of his life, and the next person's going to have a different life, but they can still
Correct.
apply the surrender experiment. They can still have
Yes,
a similar story
absolutely.
as applied to their own personal condition. So very, very good. But and I also love the pictures. I love to be able to see,
Oh
oh,
my
that's the
gosh, me
that's the house
too.
you moved into. That's your 85,000 square foot business
I wanted to
building.
see the inside of the meditation room
Me
in the
too.
cupola thing that he said had stained glass. I'm
I
like, God, I
know.
want to see.
I want to see that, like the renderings, the Yoganandas of it all. I wanted to see, but
Yes.
I do appreciate that. That helps me really anchor into the story. Okay, so any final thoughts that you have before we?
No, I think that, just looking forward to seeing how he ties it all up with a bow next week.
Indeed, me as well. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. If you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, share especially, because I think people need to have conversations like this. People need to think on these things that are lovely and think on these spiritual things. And we're having these conversations. They're so edifying for us, you and I personally.
Yes.
But I know that there are other people that can really receive from this as well. So don't forget to share and also leave us a good review. That's so helpful for us in the Miraculous Thinking community. And until next time, stay warm, stay happy, stay blessed. Bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye.